From Washington, this is VOA News. Search resumes for missing AirAsia jet with 162 aboard. NATO wraps up combat mission in Afghanistan. I'm Ray Kouguell reporting from Washington. The search for a missing AirAsia plane with 162 people aboard resumed today on the Java Sea after rescuers scaled back efforts overnight. Indonesian vessels remained in the search area. Air search flights had been suspended until dawn. VOA's Steve Herman reports.
Indonesia AirAsia Flight 8501 departed Surabaya in Indonesia for Singapore's Changi Airport on what should have been a routine 2-hour and 15-minute flight over the Java Sea. The Director General of Aviation for Indonesia's Transportation Ministry, Djoko Atmojio, told reporters that the last transmission from a crew member on the Airbus A320 came at 6:12 a.m. local time. He says the pilot stated that he was trying to avoid clouds and was moving left of the intended route and requested permission to climb. 6 minutes later, the plane disappeared from radar. The low-cost AirAsia family of airlines has had no fatalities since beginning operations 18 years ago. Steve Herman, VOA News, Bangkok.
The Airbus had 149 Indonesian passengers on board, along with 3 South Koreans and 1 person each from Singapore, Malaysia, and Britain. Libyan jets bombed the Islamic militia-held city of Misrata for the first time on Sunday. Libyan forces targeted an area near the city's main airport. It is unclear if there are any casualties. The airstrikes were an apparent response to a militia attempt last week to seize Libya's largest oil terminal of Sidra. At least 5 oil storage tanks were set on fire. This is VOA News. The Italian Coast Guard says at least 1 person died while attempting to escape a burning car ferry off the Greek island of Corfu. Hundreds of passengers remain trapped on the vessel as Greek and Italian helicopters attempt to reach the stricken ferry in a rescue effort hampered by gale-force winds and high seas. The fire broke out on a car deck of the Italian-flagged Norman Atlantic, traveling from the western Greek port of Patras to the Italian port of Ancona. Rescuers in Malaysia are struggling to reach thousands of people affected by the country's worst flooding in 3 decades. 5 people so far have been killed, and more than 160,000 people displaced by the rising waters that affected at least 8 states. Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak announced $143 million in aid for the hardest-hit regions. Iran's Revolutionary Guard says one of its senior officials was killed Saturday while fighting the Islamic State in Iraq. The Guard says that Brigadier General Hamid Taqavi was serving as an advisory role to the Iraqi army defending Samarra, a city north of Baghdad. The NATO-led military alliance in Afghanistan formally ended its 13-year-long combat mission on Sunday. A relatively undertrained Afghan National Security Force is now left to fight the deadly Taliban insurgency largely on its own. Ayaz Gul has more.
Commander General John Campbell rolled up the green and white ISAF flag and unfolded the flag of a new so-called Resolute Support mission.
Today marks an end of an era and the beginning of a new one. Resolute Support will serve as a bedrock of our enduring partnership with Afghanistan.
NATO's Resolute Support mission will consist of around 13,000 mostly American personnel that will continue advising, assisting, and training Afghan national security forces in their fight against the Taliban. New Afghan President Ashraf Ghani has called on the Taliban and its allies to engage in peace talks with his national unity government. Ayaz Gul for VOA News, Islamabad.
The American-born spiritual leader of Israel's African Hebrew movement, Ben Ami Ben Israel, has died at 75. A movement spokesperson said Ben Israel died suddenly on Saturday. The cause of death is unclear. Ben Israel was born in Chicago, Illinois. He had what he called a vision in 1966 to lead about 400 other black Jews to Israel. The group arrived in Liberia and then migrated to Israel 3 years later. The African Hebrews were eventually granted permanent residency, and Ben Israel himself was granted Israeli citizenship. I'm Ray Kouguell in Washington.
That's the latest world news from VOA.